Fiber, a web framework inspired by Express and built atop fast HTTP. The fastest HTTP engine for Go is designed for simplifying rapid development while keeping zero memory allocation and performance as key considerations. In this video, we will talk about how we can create endpoints, middlewares, and validate requests in Fiber. Okay, I have created a simple project. I have just go.mod file and just a main Go. First, let's download our Fiber project. No, I don't want to update. Okay, first we will need to get Fiber, so I will just copy because I am a lazy man. Yes, this is our project, Go Fiber. Okay, we have downloaded. Nice. I can close it. Okay, first we need to create an instance for Fiber app. New. I have an app instance. With this instance, let's create a get endpoint first. I want a get endpoint, and this is my root. It's a virtual path, you can think about it. And a callback function, which has the context. We can just return a simple context, just send string, like, hey, I'm here. And we can listen our string at port 3000. With the five lines, we have just created a get endpoint. Okay, let's create. You can just say go build, but I will just use the IntelliJ. I'm JetBrains. Okay, cool. And let's open it. And when I run it, it says yes. Hey, I'm here. And we have created our first get endpoint with the Fiber. That's cool. Okay. Okay, what did we do? We just created a get endpoint. We have specified the path and the callback function when we call this endpoint. Okay, now let's create another endpoint, but this one has variable in its path. Then we need to specify it in our path. So let's say we have an order, and we will just return the order code. That means we have order code like this. And here is our function, which will return context dot send string, and it will just say this is your order code, which is how we can reach it. We will just say context.params and specify the key, which is order code, and that's it. Just run again. Okay, now let's say we have an order code. Our code is 9p8, and this is your order code 9p8. That's cool, great. Okay, our next endpoint is a post endpoint. Now let's see how we can create a post endpoint, and we will just create an order. Okay, so this is a post endpoint. So orders is, I think, okay, it's proper. Yes, okay. So first we need to get a request. So let's say we have a create order request, like so. I'm creating a type for create order request. Forgot to say struct. So we will just have a shipment number for our code. Oops. A shipment number for our code. And in order to deserialize it, and I will just copy the backtick because I still can't do it in my keyboard. So JSON shipment number, yes, backtick again. Cool. Okay, now that we have a request, we can just create a var request, which is a create order request. Now we need to deserialize our request, so we need to parse it. Parse body parser, yes, body parser. So we need to get our request from the body and parse it. So we need to assign the parsed request to our request object. So our request, and if we have any error, we will just return the error. Oops. Yes, we will just return the error. If we have not, we will just say your order is created. So return context. Now we will return our string with a status, which could be created status, and we will return with a JSON and say your order is created successfully. Order created successfully. I hope I have written it down. Yes, successfully at the first time. Great. Okay, now let's call this endpoint, and I will just copy my curl because I don't want to waste time with it. I just have a curl request with the header application JSON. My request is post, and my data is just a shipment number, and I'm calling it, and it says order created successfully. Great. And this is how you can create a post endpoint. It is like a minimal API if you are coming from a .NET background. In .NET 7 we have .NET minimal APIs, and these are like that. So this is how you can create get endpoint and post endpoint. Okay, now let's talk about middlewares. The simplest middleware we can create is just log the request, right? So we will just do that, and we will just use function that gets context, that fiber.context, and it will return an error. And what do we want? We just want to write our request, right? So we will just say format.println, and you have called context request URI. You have called this endpoint like this, and we need to convert it to a string. So string. Cool. Now we can move on to the next middleware or the main function. So we need to say context.next, and yes, but I forgot our pointer signature. If I move this code block to here, actually this won't work for these endpoints. So if you want to register your middlewares for all endpoints, you need to first register your middleware, then your endpoints. We are just registering our endpoints and middlewares to app function. You can think about like that, think like that. So I will just move my code block again to first section. Okay, now I will just run it again, and let's post again because we already have here. Okay, auto create successfully, and you have code orders like this. So this is our first middleware. You can see this the simplest one, and you can just create a middleware with 3, 4, 5 lines of code. A little more complex middleware about a validation in the header. For example, it could be about a correlation ID. It is a real world example, right? You can put validations in your endpoints and say if you have the correlation ID header is mandatory, and you can validate, and if it is null, then you can return a bad request. And let's do that for our this get endpoint. And in this endpoint, if we don't have a correlation ID, we can just return bad request, but with middleware. So our middleware will be specified to this endpoint. It could be about every endpoint, but for the sake of the learning, we will just specify for this endpoint. How we can do it? We can just say, okay, app.use again. But if I specify a path in the first parameter, that means it will just work for that path. So our path is orders code order code. Yes, let's create our function again, which is getting a context, a fiber context, and returns an error. And in here we will validate our correlation ID. So first let's say get, which is getting the value with the key, and let's say our value is x correlation ID, and say correlation ID. If our correlation ID is empty, then we can just return a bad request. With saying correlation ID is mandatory. Now we validate it. We can maybe parse that correlation ID to convert from string to GUID and put it to our context so our endpoint can access directly, like a key value. So in order to do that, we need to have GUID library. So uid.parse, which it is imported in here, as you can see. So let's do it. Var error, and if you have an error, that means our correlation ID is not a GUID. Context dot with the request of get request, and say correlation ID is not a GUID or must be GUID. We don't need this actually, so I will just discard it. And now that we have our correlation ID, we can just say context.locals. We can just put it like key value. So our key is correlation ID. No, correlation ID. Yes, and correlation ID. Now we can just move to our next chain for our middleware. So context.next, and that's it. Now we have created a middleware that validates our correlation ID, put it to our context, and we have specified it for a specified path. And in here, in our get this endpoint, we can just maybe log it so that we can see, we can access the correlation ID. Okay, in this get endpoint, in order to get our local key value, we can log it. So print format and say your correlation ID is we can just say locals. What was our key correlation ID? Oops, yes. Okay, let's work it. And let's call our endpoint, which says orders code, right? Orders code, order code, which is MFK order, and it says correlation ID is mandatory. That's cool. That means our validation is working. So let's call it with our curl and add header, a GUID header with correlation ID, which I already have one. How lucky I am, right? So let's put it here, which it says we have a correlation ID in our header. This is our endpoint, and let's call it. And it says this is your code, thank you. And in our Golang, as you can see, this is your correlation ID. It's cool. So if you want to pass some variables or values, you can just use this local key value store in our context locals. There are a lot of middlewares that Fiber is providing. One of the most important one is recover middleware. What is it? So in order to do that, I'll just show you the why actually. Okay, let's say something wrong happened in here and we have just panicked, like, oh my god, I have something. And yes, OMG, I have something. I'm not sure what is it. Okay, so when we call this function, this is just saying what are you doing. Okay, when we run this function, and let's call it in arc and refresh, and what happened? Our app just crashed. It panicked. So we have panic at sometimes. We are humans. As our projects can have panic too. In order to not panic, we can just have recover middleware, and we can use use recover dot new. In order to work it, we need to actually import the library, so I will just copy and paste it. Get here. Yes. Okay. Now we don't need to panic, but let's run it so we can see it. And in arc, I'm refreshing. OMG, I have something, I'm just refreshing, and it's cool. as you can see, our app don't crash. And so this is one of the key middlewares that we need to have in our projects. If you want to look at the middlewares in Fiber, you can just check out their documents. They have a lot of documents, as you can see, compress, course, e-tech, blah blah, everything they have. I'll just share the link within the description. The last section in Fiber is about validation. In the real world, we always need to validate some requests and return some actionable and structured customized error messages. In order to do this, we have a validator library, which called validator. It is a de facto for this job, and it works great with Fiber. So first, let's install the library. So go get this. Okay, let's open our terminal and go get this. Okay, so what we can do, we have already a post endpoint and we are creating orders in here. So maybe we can validate our order request and return some customized error. So we have a base response maybe, and we have a customized validation error. And if we have an error in our requests, we can return that error structure. So let's say we have a customized structure like type validation error struct. So we can just say maybe we have a has error. Okay, we have a field. So which field and which tag. So I will just explain to you in a moment what tag is. And we have a value which could be anything. So that's the interface. And we are creating a customized validator, right? So we will use the validate, but we need to have some customized functions and return error structures. So we can create a type customized validator, custom validator, which will use our validate. Cool. We can just create validator object. So our validate goes validator dot new. Cool. Okay, now we have our validate object. We can just create a customized object, and if we have an error in our validate function of the validate library, we can just turn that into our this structure and return this error type. So we need to create a function for it and just say func custom. Validator is more true. Yes, English. And let's say validate, which we will have a data which could be anything, and we will just return our validation error, right? Our customized error object, which could be a list because there could be a lot of things. Validation error. Now we can start to validate. We can just create an empty string of validation errors. Validation errors. Validation error. Cool. Let's run our validate function, which is validate.struct function, because we are validating a struct. So what we are validating? Our data, right? And if you have any errors, that means we have an error. If it's not null, for every error we can create a new validation error and append to our validation errors array. So this could be like this validation errors. So now we can create a validation error type. So we can create a validation error. Okay, so our validation errors value is our errors value. Our field is error field. Our tag is our tag, and we have a has error, which is true always, right? And we can append to our array. So this, and append our validation errors and validation error. Now we can return our validation errors. Yes. Okay, we have created our customized validation error. So I just said I will talk about the tag. So tag is how we can validate our properties. Like in our request, let me cut this and get it to here. For the shipment number, we can just say with our validator package, this field is required. So I will just say validate required. That means it is like not null. If you have used fluent validation in .NET, it is like that, like it is not null. Maybe we can just add a property. We can just maybe say country code of the order. Country code. Maybe we are just selling orders in specified countries. Country code, yes. It could be required, and maybe len could be length, short for length, could be 2. So because every country code consists of 2 characters. I'm not sure about it. Maybe it could be 3, but it's 2 or 3. But you get the idea. So now that we have our validate custom validator, we can just create our custom validator in our function. Just say custom validator. Yes, custom validator, and our validator is validate. Okay, now that we have our validator, let's go to our post endpoint. Where is it? It's here. Cool. Okay. In here, if you have any errors in our validations, errors, oops, custom validator dot validate, and let's send our request to here. And if we have any errors more than 0, maybe we can see if our error is true, not mandatory. Okay, how we can return? Let's say we have more than 1 error, so maybe we can concatenate them within a string and just return that string. So in order to do that, we need to have a string array first. So like error messages. Like this, for every error. We already have error, so let's say error 2. For every error, we can just append to error messages and say append to our error messages and add say with formatted string and say printf. This field has failed and validation tag is this, so which is error dot field and error dot tag. So tags are this, like required, not null, length 2. This is our tags. We can have required, we can have length. We have a lot of tags in the validator library. You can check out all of them in the documentation. So back to here, this is not printf, sprintf, yes, and we can just say return context dot with status pet request, and with JSON, and we can just join our error messages, strings dot join with our error messages. With it says like this field has failed, validation this, and that field has failed, and validation is like that. Cool. Now we have created a custom validator, and we have returned our all validation errors within a string. Okay, let's see if it works. Okay, we have created. So let's see our curl. I already have one in here. How lucky I am. So in here, we already had a post, right? So I've just added a country code, which is TR for Turkey. And when I hit this, it says not found URL because there isn't a command like that. So let's add a C, curl, and it says undefined validation function land on field. Okay, because we have a space here. We don't allow space in here. That's fine. Let's go again. And it says order created successfully. Cool. And let's see, maybe I'm lying to you. So let's change our country code to TR33, and it says country code has failed and the validation is len. So our length tag is failed. Like I said, there are a lot of tags. Maybe we need to create custom tags, which is really easy in validator package. Maybe we can just say we have an age property in our order and we just don't want to sell to people who is older than 40 because we are just bad people. I'm not sure. Let's edit. Okay, let's say we have an age, which is an int, I'm pretty sure we don't have long. And this is age, and our validation is it is required, and we will create a custom tag in here. So in order to do that, we need to actually register a validation function to our custom validator. How we can do that? We can just do this by getting here, yes, custom validator, and say validator dot register validation. So we are just saying I want this tag to work like this. So our first parameter is tag, which is old age. We don't want to sell them. Our next parameter is a function, which is field level type, and we can just say our field level field. We need to convert it to integer first, int, and say less than 40. Now we can use our old age tag in here and say old age. Cool. Yes. Now let's try it again. So we need to have an age, right? So I will just add an age to here. Wait, I already have one here. Here we have 45 age and says, yes, we have age 45. I've just cleared my terminal and create again, and says age field has failed. Validation is old age. You are old and we don't want to sell you anything. And let's see how it goes for younger people, and turn it to 25 and it says order created successfully. Great. As you can see, we can create custom validation tags in validator package. And this is how you can create endpoints, middlewares, and validator requests in Fiber. I will share the source code in the description, so maybe you can play it in your local as well. In the next video, we will do a little factoring and move some foldering and create a controller folder. We will move our endpoints to controller and set ground for controller service repository layers, and we will add Swagger support to our endpoints. That's for it today. See you in the next video. May the force be with you.